just to give you an example of, we saw the recent troubles in Belfast, but of course they didn't just start out of the blue. These troubles have been going on for hundreds of years, and as you may well know, there was trouble in Ireland fighting to get rid of the British for hundreds of years. And when the British did come and put down uprisings and put down through battles, they also brought in laws to keep the Roman Catholics in their place, if you like. And one of the things that they did was they brought in schooling. We all take schools for granted, but schools are relatively a new invention. There were only schools in Ireland legally from about 1830. Prior to that, everyone went to separate schools or went to schools that weren't regulated. Once they brought in regulated schools, the first thing that they did, of course, was make all the school books standard, so that all schools taught the same curriculum. And worse, they were all to be taught in English. So a lot of the Roman Catholics who spoke Irish, who didn't want their kids to speak English, established what were called head schools, and they taught up in the hills, and they taught Irish, they taught Latin, they taught Greek, and they taught Irish culture. Whereas when you went to an English school, you were taught British history, you were taught in English language, and you were introduced to British sports, as I said earlier, soccer or football, cricket and rugby. And some of these remnants of these schools finally died out by about the 1840s, again just before the famine, when strangely enough people weren't worried about their kids speaking Irish anymore, because the future was Canada. The very first place that people started going to from Northern Ireland or Ireland ended up in Canada, because America stopped immigration into the States, so they went up to Canada, up to Toronto, and then came down over the border. So a lot of people, Irish people, ended up in Canada, ended up in America, but they went to Canada first. Of course, a lot of people ended up staying in Canada. So we do have a big Irish connection in Canada. But there's a couple of caves around this, just a few hundred meters ahead. If Terry's slow enough to drive past them, you can see a couple of caves. They're just on around a wee bit, Terry. And these caves were used by two sisters. Not only in recent times they made whiskey, but they were originally head schools, or places that people were taught the Irish language, and not quite against the law. A blind eye was turned, but you see them now coming up on the left hand side. I'll point them out just so we get by them. And these were used up until the Second World War. You see just now on the left hand side, and another one on the left hand side. And these caves were used by people to teach Irish inside them, and just little remnants. The two sisters who were left sold whiskey, illegal whiskey, and the reason that the police never done anything about it was because they gave the police free whiskey, and they were left alone until they finally died, and then the caves were stopped being used. But that's not that long ago. Again, the Second World War, and again you can see where they blasted holes right through the archways, or right through the rock, to create the roadway. Some of these harbours, by the way, you might realise are not being used. Again, after the famine, when so many people had died and were starving, there was no work in this area. So what they did was they created work, and they created work, but not only by building a road, but by building these little harbours. And that's why you have every little town has a harbour. It was, if you like, a way of getting work. Here you can see an old method of doing your grass. They just turn the grass. They cut the grass and turn it, leave it to dry. It's not really done by machinery as such in that case.